Can the tortoise make the impact that many had longed for back in the day in 2023? Well, we're about to find out. Today's replay focuses on a very aggressive push from the tortoise at the early stages of the game to ensure a concise and quick victory within this replay, and of course moving towards the left or southern side of the map and pushing towards the left or western side so he can make an advance, and of course playing up against the T10 and the other tier 9s as well as some tier 10s within this replay. Of course the enemy tortoise also pushing towards him and putting a couple of rounds quick and early in at the beginning of this round, and of course trying to place a nice round into the lower plate of the T95 unsuccessfully, but still a very nice and early on game. So with the enemy tortoise now pushing towards him, it's time to start racking out the damage onto the weak point of the tortoise being that big cupola. And yes, in today's meta the cupola is still terrible, so with a couple of rounds into it you can slowly start and whittle down the tortoise's health, and that is exactly what you're seeing within this replay, with failed attempts from the enemy tortoise to fully penetrate, but with a really quick and easy round at the beginning he places it finally into the tortoise and shuts him down, having picked up 2,300 damage within just 2.5 minutes of the game starting, and racking up even more as he starts progressing towards the remaining tanks on this flank. And of course that includes this T10 who overexposes himself, and that is not what you want to do against a tortoise, shutting him down very successfully. And there was very little time to pause for a break within this replay, and that kind of sums up the tortoise in its totality, especially when you're in games like this, because everyone thinks that they're going to escape with just not taking a hit, or at least taking just one hit against the tortoise, but often it ends up with them taking multiple or multiples. So with the STI now thinking that he can survive multiple hits by the tortoise, having seen the T10 and the Lorraine take multiple hits straight through the front of their tanks, you're about to witness a kind of just a rout through the STI. And with just tracking him, the tortoise can also be devastating, because not only can you actually deal damage, but you can start racking up damage through the assistance feature in World of Tanks, and especially when you can come up against other tanks like the Lorraine here, who thinks that the turret armor is good, but unfortunately because of the accuracy of the tortoise you can just place rounds into even the weak points of the turret of that vehicle, and with the gun depression not being awful on this tank either, you can even use some spots that most tanks or at least most players just wouldn't be aware of. And with the aggression from the tortoise here against the T95, who is now in a bit of a terrible position, having been flanked by both the front and rear and side of the team, he's able to play some nice rounds into that lower plate, which is of course one of the biggest weak points of the T95, other than that cupola that he just manages to bounce off. Yes, that is a weak point, even though it is probably one of the stronger parts of the armour. And with the T124 now in a very precarious position, the next up on the chopping board against the tortoise, yeah, he's going to be finding the exact same defeat as the rest of his team have found against the tortoise, albeit the T124's APCR rounds are probably enough to go straight through the front of the tortoise, but you cannot still sit there in front of him, because yes, this thing is going to tear you apart regardless of how much damage you deal back to it, unless you shut it down. And with that, the T124 also falls against the tortoise, and with the T10 also trying to make his escape and being shut down, the enemy team are just disappearing at this point. And this really showcases how the tortoise is still one of the best tank destroyers and one of the most fun tank destroyers to be playing in World of Tanks 2023. And of course, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about this tank. Is it as OP, or at least as strong as it's being made out within this video, or is it just a case of the right situation, the right time, and the right tank for this map? And of course, now with the aggression towards the FE4005 and the remaining tanks who have been camping in their base, or at least near their base, it's really time to start getting the extra damage to really take the damage total from not just 7,900 in just 5.5 minutes to even higher. And with the tortoise's DPM, there's no surprise that you're seeing results like this against them. And with the Object 268 now thoroughly aiming towards the tortoise, yeah, you can kind of back away from that tank, especially if they're loading heat rounds. But with the 268 giving the side of his armour, or at least the top of that tank, you're probably going to be able to see some rounds flying in, and you've got to be very careful in the tortoise not to overexpose yourself into multiple directions, because that is when this tank starts to become very difficult to play indeed, is when you get caught out in the open or where you get tracked in the open. And with some nice shots here using the accuracy that the tortoise has, you're going to be able to really do significant amounts of damage, and the 268 really has no kind of real way of coming back from this other than the fact that you're just trying to launch rounds into the tortoise, but it's just not going to happen. And you're seeing now the tortoise advance, and that is exactly what the tortoise does well. It's about playing it aggressively, and with this sort of gameplay style you can have the results that you've always been wanting within this. And with the 121B now being super aggressive, or at least kind of trying to be a little bit cheeky, pushing up towards the tortoise, trying to get that shot into the cupola, most likely he's going to be able to do it. But unfortunately for the Object 140 sat behind, he is now going to be bearing the brunt of the tortoise. And with some nice rounds into that track or frontal track, potentially unfortunately missing with that last shell, you can see here the nice accuracy of the tortoise playing in very nicely. But with the 121B just being a proper nuisance, maybe we'll be seeing him get out of the game pretty quickly. But round after round into that weak point of the tortoise can be a real pain. And with the last kind of death throes of this game, the tortoise does get shut down by the 121B, but he does manage to pick up nearly 11,000 damage in probably one of the more aggressive, more highly utilised tank destroyers within this game. Of course, let me know what you think of the tortoise in the comment section down below, and I'll join you there. Goodbye.